actually haven't rehearsed an opener yet, so it's just normally me giggling. So here we go. So welcome back to Why Not Ask Questions. Why Not Asks Questions. That's a tongue tie in itself. We are talking today about with the lovely Shulah, who I have joining me, and we're talking about her and everything that is her and amazing. And we're doing this interview because she has such a beautiful, lovely human, and I just wanted to like bring her energy into this space with all of you so that we can all be here together. So Shulah, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into good week, bad week?
Yeah, I am, sorry, intros are always fun. I'm Shulah, she, her pronouns. Living in lockdown Melbourne, so much fun these days. Living as a trans woman, working for the YMCA amongst a bunch of other things, super passionate about just like trying to get everyone to be as good of a person as possible. And I feel like that's a half decent intro.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so as everybody knows, I'm Lauren. I'm the digital content coordinator for the WhyNot platform, and we are all about creating a digital space, safe space for young people to share their thoughts and opinions and stories. We're very big on the importance of creating a safe space and amplifying the voices of young people, and how and we are always looking to continually learn from young people around us, including our contributors, and so that's why we've asked Shulah to join us today. So we kick off every Why Not meeting with a good week, bad week check-in. So Shulah, I'll let you go first. So you just tell us one good thing that happened this week for you, and I know it's hard because you are in lockdown Melbourne, and one bad week that's happened for you.
I'm gonna go with, because they're technically both falls into good week, bad week as the same thing. And I mean, it's a week in that it happened within the last 7 days. I have moved, which like doing that in lockdown is kind of weird. Having to wear a mask and carrying furniture up flights of stairs isn't the most fun thing, but moving is kind of fun and exciting, and I'm in this new place, and yeah, that's both my good week and bad week.
I love that. Change is always a tough thing to like navigate. But did you move far from your last place?
Sort of, yeah. I was living in Williamstown, and I've moved to St Kilda, so essentially across the city, much further than my 5K radius, which I'm meant to be within.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so my good week is that a magazine that I have been waiting on for what feels like months now, but was really only a month, has finally hit the stand. So I got to buy that yesterday. So it's called Breathe. So I'm really excited to sit down tonight with a cup of tea and read through that. And my bad week is I'm having a little bit of tree envy at the moment, because everybody in my street's tree is like blossoming with like colorful flowers and stuff. And mine is completely nude, not a leaf in sight. And I'm thinking it like has to do with the fact that I can't, I just don't have that green thumb situation down pat yet. So that's my good week, bad week. As Shulah said, she works for the Y, as do I, through the WhyNot platform. And so we're going to kickstart with how, like, your initial reaction to landing an interview at the Y.
Yeah, so this was, I was about to say what year it was, but I don't properly remember. I believe it was late 2016. No, whenever it was, a couple of years ago. I had been out of work for a little bit, desperately looking for a job, and thanks to a different youth movement I had been a part of, I had gotten some free lifeguard quals, and makes me a little bit more employable because it means I can go for roles such as lifeguard. And so I did. There was a spot that had opened up at one of the centres near the city. It wasn't too far from me, and enough of a schlep that it was a bit of a stretch, but not enough that I still decided to go for it. And it was kind of intimidating because, like, yeah, I had never interacted with a YMCA before. But the one thing that I did know was the name, which was Young Men's Christian Association. And two-thirds of those defining features are not me. Thankfully I was still young, but I was going to apply, or I wasn't applying at the time, but like I am a Jewish trans woman, and I was like, this organization kind of goes against every grain in my body, especially in a couple of years when I'm no longer young. how's this going to go
I'm
down?
no longer young. I love that.
Right? And like there was definitely nerves about that because I was like, is it just a name? Is it actually like super Christian? Am I gonna be that awkward token employee that's like, oh yeah, we totally, and no, it turned out that all of those fears were not true at all. But yeah, that was like kind of my first super duper initial interaction with the Y.
I love that. It's just I'm almost not young anymore either. I'm not a man and I'm not Christian, so like I think we've got a lot in common there. Okay, so the initial contract for you was about 6 months, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, it was for over the summer season, so October to April. I think that's 6 months or close enough.
Something like that. Yeah. Who knows time these days? But you then had the opportunity to extend that contract, and I assume they offered you a contract extension. But what was it about that sort of space or the Y in general that made you want to stay on after that initial 6 month stint?
Yeah. So honestly, because it was actually a complete role change. So like I went from lifeguarding to being at the front desk. A big thing that pushed me to want to do it was, despite not being out at the time, the center I was at was super duper inclusive. Yeah, they had done a bunch of training with Trans Vic, as well as had run this really incredible, really fun Rainbow Pride event, and it was just not only that, but the staff and the community and everyone was just so lovely that it was kind of like, I don't want to leave. I just am enjoying working with these people. So yeah.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about coming out, courage, and vulnerability. So for me, vulnerability is this like really dirty word. I hate it. I don't like being vulnerable. But and because sharing any part of yourself to anyone is like terrifying because you're risking like judgment and backlash, and also like once it's out there, it's really hard to take it back. Like so being a creative means putting a lot of or a little of my unfiltered self into my work. And it's like only marginal compared to what you did. But it's like an extension of myself and the build up to releasing anything that is my work. Is like it gets harder and harder every time. I'll often like release in this like rush of adrenaline, just like really wake myself up to it, release, and then I feel like I can't breathe until like someone messages me and they're like, hey, that was really good work, or like, I loved that. And then I'm like, oh, thank goodness. But that's like just snippets of myself that I'm exposing to audiences of my choosing. Whereas when you came out, it took a great deal of courage and you sort of did it in a space where probably was not like, nothing was really planned. Is that right? Just like walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's this funny thing, like at this point I had probably been working at this center for about 10 months. I had been trying to plan it in my head for that full 10 months of like, oh, I'll talk to my manager, or like I'll suss out and find the center manager and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, it was really exactly that, of like all of those struggles with vulnerability is a big thing of what kept stopping me, because it was like, oh, well, I'm going to have this chat with this person, and then I know it's going to escalate. At no point was that conversation going to be a chat with one person and it's done. It was going to be this whole big snowball effect, and I was constantly stressed about it. And what had actually happened was I had been asked to help out with the presentation. So the Pride event that the centre had done was up for an award in the city of Melbourne. And yeah, I was helping out a bit. Yeah, that in itself was so cool. And then at one point, because I was just, the whole thing was that the presentation, they decided to be a little unorthodox and try and recreate the pool party vibe for the presentation. So they got me to DJ. And then during that, when we were practicing, they were reading through their scripts and they weren't sure about some of the wording. And I was like, I know LGBTQI plus terminology. I know what you can say. And I went to butt in, and then I was like, oh shit, if I'm butting in, I should probably like be super honest about why, not only do I know, like why I know all of this pretty bloody well. And so I was, to all of the managers in the center in one go, I was just like, yeah, so look, I'm actually a trans woman. Shulah's my name. She has my pronouns. Let's do it. And that was how it happened. And it was super unplanned and super intimidating. but it worked out. Yeah.
That's so cool. So you just sort of like, again, I guess it was a rush of adrenaline yourself,
Yeah.
in this like totally unplanned environment, and you hadn't really had much to do with the senior exec like too much. So you're really like coming out in a space that is not with familiar faces or overly familiar faces, would you say?
They were all somewhat familiar. The centre was small enough that I knew them all, and through my role working at the front desk, I had plenty of casual conversations, but a lot of them, yeah, didn't really know personally, and so it was a bit of a jump from "Hey, how's it going?" conversation, which is the extent of quite a few of those chats, to "Yeah, this is my deep secret personal history."
I love that. Okay, so once you came out, what was sort of like the initial reaction of that center, and how did things change for you?
It
And were
was,
you really nervous? Like,
yeah,
was it like
so
holding of breath?
because it wasn't planned at all, like I've heard and read of a whole bunch of stories of the way that most people do it is they go through HR and like there's a bit of an announcement that's made and everyone's made aware and it's all planned out and all that sort of stuff. But instead, I just like blurted it out, and then immediately they were all on top of it, and were like, "Yeah, we're going to change your name here, here, and here." And then it meant that like rather than an announcement going out to all of the staff, they just like would see it casually on the roster of like, "Oh, my old name's not there, but there's this new person, Shulah, that's on the," and like making connections that way. And so it was like a little awkward, but it was also super lovely in that everyone, yeah, extremely supportive and just there. Like the second that it clicked in everyone's head, it was nothing but smiles and support from the staff. And yeah.
Awesome. And do you think that like you talked about, you won the award for Pride Month and things like that. Do you think it was around because like the centre was so proactive in that space about like diversity and inclusion and I guess acceptance of being like who you are?
Yeah, fully. One quick, not that it's the biggest thing, but unfortunately we didn't win. We were nominated, which was still super great. But yeah, no, I definitely a huge factor because it's this thing that like not only myself, but I find a lot of people in the LGBTI community really like go through is very easy for someone to be like, yeah, we support you. It's another thing to actually see it. And so, yeah, to have the events, to have the training, and to just constantly see the reinforcement and really essentially walking the walk, right? Like everyone's great at talking the talk. The center really was good at going, no, like we're actually here for you. We're going to support you.
Awesome. Yeah. That's so awesome. And so as like you're obviously behind the front desk and you're receiving customer feedback and you went to the gym yourself, is that right? And so like having like what were your thoughts and feelings or did you encounter or experience yourself seeing that representation there and having them walk the walk, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I like essentially being part of the walking of the walk, or however best to phrase that. It's no, it's super rad for me because I get to be that representation. And I've had one or two people approach me that we kind of knew and didn't, but not properly, after seeing me behind the desk, be like, it's so cool seeing you there. And it does really reaffirm of like, if there's a queer staff member, then it just helps to set that feeling of, there's not going to be issues of going to the change rooms. There's not, if there's another patron that's being shitty towards you, that the center is actually going to back you up. And it's, yeah. And I felt that myself. I had gotten really weak. Like I was terrified of working out, especially in public for so many different reasons. I've got dysphoria of how I look, as well as like, I didn't want to look muscly. Like but having, thanks to the meds I was on, I had zero testosterone in me for like 18 months at this point. I had lost so much strength and I really needed to do it. And it was really only because I had come out that I felt comfortable actually using a gym and going to the center. And like I refused to really go anywhere else because it's like exactly that. I don't know what the other places are going to be like, but I know that here it's going to be good. So yeah.
Cool. So let's backtrack a little bit. So you said when you first started at the Y, you interviewed in a lifeguard position, and you and I talked about the difference between lifeguard and lifesaver earlier in the week. But I've never been a lifeguard myself, so let's talk a little bit about that interview process, because it's not your like typical sit down. I mean, I assume you have elements of sit down, introductions. What are my top 5 qualities kind of thing, but there's also that added element of like proving that you can swim, or maybe not.
No, there is, and it's not only is it in the interview, but every year when I've got to get my qualifications updated, I got to hop in the water, and it's this really fun weird thing where, like, for personal reasons, like I haven't legally changed my name, so when I rock up there, it's got my old name and like all that stuff. And I mean, going to the interview specifically, it was this weird point because I had been on hormones for about 6 to 7 months, had a little bit of breast growth, but like not that much, enough that if you wore a bra, you clearly have breasts, but if I'm topless, I don't. And it was this weird thing where I was presenting as a male during this interview, and it was at an indoor center. It's kind of weird to wear a rashie at an indoor center. And so I had to make this call of like, to myself, I'm technically breaking the rules. Like, I'm bare-chested as a woman in a public pool, but for my own safety, I was using the male change rooms and all, and it was just a pretty icky experience. Like, pretty fucked up is the best way to put it.
100%, because you had come out socially in some circles, but like obviously not yet at work. So like dealing with that, I imagine, would have been like very complicated.
Yeah, it was really weird, and it's this fun game that you get to play of like, A, do I go into boy mode? B, if I do, am I getting away with it, right? Like, I hadn't really tried to pass off as a guy, and so at that point, probably even still, besides for working for like 6-7 months, and all of a sudden I'm by a pool, 40s, shirtless, and it's like, yeah, man. And it's like, I don't know how to do that. I've got long hair and like, I've got,
No, I get it. You're technically freeing the nipple,
Yeah, I was objectively freeing the nipple.
So like you're living the dream, to some extent. Okay, so you were sort of living a double life at that stage, but then you began working at the Y, you came out, and then you were still technically living this double life, because you were working at two separate places.
Yeah, so that was a fun thing that, like, again, because it was a spur of the moment, I super hadn't thought of. It was just like, yeah, I'm gonna come out. Okay, let's deal with this. I had also been working at another center not too far from me. And it was this weird fun game where, especially because I had applied for the role a couple of months before I came out at Center A, and so I go to Center B, and it literally was starting from scratch of like, okay, let's suss it out. What are they doing? Literally, I combed through their socials of like, have they done any Pride posts like the first center did? And I couldn't really find any. And so I was like, okay, cool. That's not fun to begin with. And then I get there, and I want to say like, it was a super lovely center, really good, and probably supportive, but I just like didn't necessarily feel it because it was just so big and it just, intimidating. And I didn't have that same support that I was seeing from the first one. And
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. You've got to be comfortable in the space that you're in, and we're very big WhyNot about creating those safe spaces, and safe spaces can look different for different people as well. So that's awesome. So 2020 has been a wild ride, to say the least. What have you been doing to keep busy other than moving, and what's in store for hopefully 2021? What is time?
Well, something that I got involved with when lockdown started like 6 months ago, and actually fully relates to like the whole experience of job hunting and whatnot, is I work with LGBTI jobs, which is, as a bit of a self-promo plug. It's a website where all of the employers on there have gone through a pre-screening process, and they're objectively LGBTI friendly. And so it's a great marker for anyone in the community to know that they're good places to go to. And so yeah, fully taking those weird, awkward experiences I've had and been like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want anyone else to do this anymore. And yeah, I've been in chats with so many companies trying to help them out and all that sort of stuff. So that's been a big take up of my time. I'm trying to think. I don't honestly know what 2021 is going to look like because I'm still figuring out what I'm going to do for 2020.
I feel like I've just given up planning more than 2 days in advance, to be honest. So, because you just don't know. You just don't know. So we touched on all sort of throughout this interview about the importance of creating safe spaces and the continued learning. I'm a very big believer that, you know, you've got to continue learning right up until like you're 90 and beyond.
Honestly, even at death, you learn what death is really like. It's a whole life thing. You've got to learn the whole time.
Exactly. But I just wanted to, like, I love talking to people and connecting with new people. But why did you want to come and chat with me and the WhyNot team and share your story, and what has that meant to you?
Yeah, so much. Sorry, I need to think about that one. Yeah, look, a big reason that I wanted to talk is that it's to really try and part of it is to put a bit of a face to the reason and the need for diversity and inclusion in workplaces. Like, it's really easy to read statistics and go, oh yeah, that's cool, and put it in the back of your brain. And it's even like, as good as trainings and these objectively should be run, studies show that after about 48 hours post like a mandatory training in work, most people have like forgotten half of it and nothing's really occurred from it. And so it's like, to really just like, I want to like be here and be like, this is important. Like, it's not just hypothetical. You don't know who's working in your workspace, and like, you got to be there for everyone.
I love that. What was that? What was the name of the place that you worked at again for the job?
LGBTI jobs.
Wonderful. We will put that link down below because I assume they have a website that people can have a look for and educate themselves on, which would be really awesome. Any other final thoughts, feelings, comments, or opinions?
Just as like a quick thing for people that are terrified of doing the wrong thing, you've got to accept that that's going to happen. And like, there's a couple of things with that. The first is the classic saying that my dad always taught me, which is, if you do it the first time, it's okay, it's an accident. The second time, that's when you've actually got to start. You know, that's when you fucked up. And with that, really just coming in with open ears, knowing that you probably will mess up at times, and when you mess up, it probably will hurt some people. And you've got to be aware of that, and you've got to be okay with it isn't the right way to phrase it, but it's kind of like, you've got to just be conscious that it's going to happen and not be afraid of that happening, and instead working your best to heal, because that's kind of like part of where diversity and inclusivity in the workplace it's like literally healing workplaces to make it more approachable. And part of that healing process is addressing it and things getting uncomfortable. And you've got to not be afraid to be uncomfortable, because the second you start to withdraw, you're probably making the people that need the change more uncomfortable and actually unsafe.
I love that. I have this this saying where it's like, lean into that discomfort, because that's when you really start to learn. Because like sitting in your comfort zone, you're not really like growing as a human. So like, yes, it might be uncomfortable to start with, but leaning into that discomfort will like help us all learn and grow. And like, you won't be alone in that discomfort either. Like, we're all in the discomfort together, if that makes sense.
Exactly, fully share the load. Like, some of us are so uncomfortable at the moment. Just be a little bit uncomfortable, so we're not uncomfortable all the time.
Yes, 100%. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. Be kind to yourselves and stay safe. Talk soon. Bye.